In this morning's Breakfast Bible Bytes, we will continue in part 11, extrapolating truths about our God through Moses' encounter with Pharaoh in Christian living. Where God demands of Pharaoh, "Let my people go." We have been looking into a supernatural battle as our sovereign God, through Moses, contends with the foolishness of idolatry by sending plagues that were a direct affront to the Egyptian gods and goddesses, as well as a faith-building reaffirmation to the Israelites of the supremacy of Jehovah, the God of their patriarchs. The third plague, gnats, was a judgment on the god Set, the god of the desert. Unlike the two previous plagues, the magicians were unable to duplicate this one, and declared to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God," Exodus 8:19. The fourth plague was leveled against Uchit, their goddess of flies. The intent of the plague was to demonstrate that God clearly distinguishes between the Egyptians and the Israelites, for no flies swarmed in the area where the Hebrew slaves lived. Exodus 8:21 through 24. The fifth plague, concerning the death of the livestock, was a judgment against both the god of Hathor and the god Apis, where scriptures depict them as cattle. In this plague also, God protected the livestock of his people, while the cattle of the Egyptians died. Jehovah was demonstrating his authority over all things, even over the economy of Egypt, while showing his aptitude and compassion to provide for those who obeyed him. To prove this point, we read in Exodus 9:7 that Pharaoh sent investigators to find out if the Israelites were also suffering along with the Egyptians. But the result was that Pharaoh's heart remained stubborn, and he still refused to let the people go. The sixth plague, the plague of boils, was a judgment against several gods over health and disease: Sekhmet, Sunu, and Isis. Exodus 9:11, where the magicians were unable to stand before Moses because boils had broken out on all of them and all of the Egyptians. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and just as the Lord had predicted to Moses, Pharaoh refused to listen. The battle was drawing to a close in Exodus 9:14 through 16. "If you don't let my people go, I will send more plagues on you and your officials and your people. Then you will know there is no one like me in all the earth. But now I could have lifted my hand and struck you and your people with a plague to wipe you off the face of the earth. But I have spared you for a purpose, to show you my power and to spread my fame throughout the earth." As an example of God's great compassion, he warned Pharaoh to gather whatever cattle and crops remained from the previous plagues and to shelter them from the coming storm. That brought on the seventh plague, which was hail, and it undermined the sky goddess Nut, as well as Osiris, who, as you will recall, was a crop fertility god, and Set, their god of their storms. The hail was unlike any that has been seen before. It was accompanied by a fire which ran along the ground, and everything left out in the open was devastated by the hail and fire. Again, the children of Israel were miraculously protected, and no hail damaged anything in their area in the land of Goshen. The eighth plague was a plague of locusts, which once again was focused on Nut, Osiris, and Set. The second harvest crop, wheat and rye, which had survived the hail, were now devoured by swarms of locusts. There would be no harvest in Egypt that year. The ninth plague was the plague of darkness, which was aimed at the sun god Ra, who was epitomized by Pharaoh himself. For 3 days the land of Egypt was smothered in unearthly darkness, but the homes of the Israelites had light. Of course, this reminds me of the body of Jesus in the dark tomb. In the next Breakfast Bible Bytes, we will cover the conclusion of this supernatural battle, where God shows himself to be the author of life.